When EC's Mad Mag started in the summer of 1952, you said you didn't expect it to do too well, according to your biography. Was this because you felt the magazine was ahead of its time?
No, compared to the type of material we were publishing, this was something brand new. We'd never done humor before. And we did it mostly for business reasons and personal enjoyment. We didn't really expect it to be successful.
All right, we'll keep it off. Give me a question now, because I have these. All right, today, do you consider Mad ahead, behind, or right on target with the times?
Well, I consider it on target. Some people feel that it's behind, and I guess there's still some parents around who think it's way ahead.
Okay. What age are the majority of your readers?
Well, since we don't take ads, we don't run surveys, but my best guess is that the majority of our readers are around 16, and then falling off on both sides, with a lot of readers from 10 through adults, but I think mostly in around 16.
Why do you think it works out that way, sir?
Well, I think most of our readers graduate to the Lampoon and Playboy then pretty soon. We didn't used to have that problem, but we do now.
Okay. What do you think is the main reason for the popularity of Mad?
Well, we've been very successful, I think, mostly because we have a very talented staff. We have great writers and great artists, and we always have, and I think they're mostly responsible for the success of the magazine, along with the editors.
Which contributor receives the most praise from the readers? Anyone?
Probably Don Martin.
Do you have any personal favorites, or?
That's like asking a parent which is his favorite child.
Yeah.
Dangerous question.
Okay. Okay, do you feel that any of the competitive humor magazines pose a threat to them?
Well, not a threat. I think perhaps Sick appeals to the younger readers because it's on a lower level. And Lampoon appeals to the older readers because it's on a higher level. So we're in between, and whereas we used to have the whole spectrum, we have lost a little readership to both of these publications. But I think there's a large overlap. People read Sick and Mad. People read Mad and Lampoon.
You say like not way back when, but do you feel like there was a time when Mad was sort of like the only humor magazine?
Well, it was for a long time. Although we've had 70 competitors over the years, but they usually came and went quickly.
Okay. What type of material gets censored from Mad?
Well, nothing anymore unless it's too sexy. We still have a teenage readership, so we can't do what Lampoon does.
What's your opinion of magazines like Lampoon?
Well, there's a place for them, and a lot of people like them. Personally, I find the Lampoon does a lot of things in what we consider bad taste. I don't mean bad taste sexually, but just maybe a little too sick for Mad. But this is very funny. I mean, I like sick jokes myself. I just wouldn't publish them.
Yeah, it's just the thing, because I saw Midday, on TV they had, and they had someone from National Lampoon, I'm not sure who it was, and he said just that. He said the humor is sick, not perverse, but just like some of it in poor taste. But
interview. You want to stop that a minute?
Yeah, sure. Okay. What type of comedy or comedians would you say Mad is patterned after? Any kind of brand of comedy, or?
Oh, gee. All of them, I guess. It depends on who the writer is that's doing the particular story. The younger ones are probably patterned after the comedians they knew, maybe Lenny Bruce and that group. my first love in comedy were the Marx Brothers, Laurel and Hardy. That was my era. So, it's a mixture, I think, of many different decades of comedy.
Do you feel each artist has their own way about them, their own sense of humor? Or?
Oh, yeah. But remember, most of Mad is not written by the artist who draws it.
Yeah.
We only have five or six artists that write their own material. Most of it is separate.
Who are those artists?
Well, Dave Berg and Don Martin and Prohias, Al Jaffe, and one more who'll kill me for forgetting.
Okay.
Aragones.
He writes those himself. All right. Do you feel that Mad satires are a secret way of criticizing what they satire?
Oh, of course. That's what satire is. That's precisely what they're about.
So, does Mad, try to comment on the times we're living in and want to bring about change?
Oh, well, we're not.
Well, okay,
we're
not
not.
that extreme.
We're not revolutionaries in that sense, but sure, when we run a story on, when we run a humorous story on how you can die from smoking, we're making a very definite point that you can die from smoking, and there's nothing funny about it. But we do it in a humorous way because that's our business.
Right.
We do the same thing with hard drugs and hard liquor. We do the same thing with deceptive packaging and all the other crap that goes on.
What about these movies that you do?
Oh, they were just fooling around, just having fun.
Each one of those movies, they're definitely.
I don't think. Well, some of them are terrible movies, but I don't think they'll hurt you. A bad movie and a cigarette are not in the same league.
Why?
How do you decide which movies to attack, more or less?
Well, we try to take the most popular ones, largely on the theory that if you haven't seen it, you won't enjoy a satire on it. So we try and take the very most popular ones, and we check variety, actually, to find out which are doing the best.
How do the movie companies feel about that? Do they mind it, or is it...
No, I think they feel it's publicity. Once in a while we get a complaint, but they haven't bothered us for a long time.
Would that be covered by the Supreme Court case that you said in your book about the songs or whatever that you were using?
No, this is a different...
oh, yeah?
Well, it's similar, but this is different.
Yeah.
It depends on how much of the original you take and what you're doing with it. Now, Jack Benny, who was one of my very favorite comedians, happened to have done, I think, an hour-long spoof on a movie called Angel Street, I think it was called. And the producers felt that he had taken too much of the movie. He had taken too much of the plot. In effect, he wasn't just kidding it, but he was stealing it, they said. And they took him to the Supreme Court and they won. And so you can't just lift anything you want. You have to do it judiciously. Of course, Mad, in an 8-page story, can't possibly be accused of competing with a 2-hour movie. And so, we don't run that risk too much, but you have to be careful.
Do you feel that you'll do the satire? I mean, the recent movies that are coming out, like Deer Hunter and all these serious movies that are coming out, because they're popular and you do satire on them anyway. The subject of the film.
Well, we only have 8 issues a year, which means we can only do eight movies. And
compared to the amount that come out, that's
there's so many come out, and we do, if possible, try and pick movies which are not good movies because it's easier to make fun of them. But we don't always. Sometimes we just pick a movie because it's such a smash hit. I kind of like Superman, but we did Superman, and And I kind of like King Kong, although I don't think it was as good as the original, so we did King Kong, you know, but...
Cheap ripoff, that's it.
Yeah. Well, it
An
kind of...
expensive ripoff.
Yeah, it was an expensive ripoff, you're right.
Do you ever get requests from the movie companies or whatever to...
No.
No.
But we did get one request, which was kind of funny. We had done a spoof on a Scotch tape ad, and Texel Tape, who was one of their competitors, called up and asked how they could get spoofed.
Really?
And Jerry, it was in the evening, and it was nobody here but Jerry, and he took the call. He says, "Run a stupid ad campaign." But I don't think they ever did it. We never did it.
Okay, let's see, what do we have here?
You ever owned a chimpanzee?
No.
How do foreign countries feel about that?
Oh, very,
I know, how
very
many
well.
countries is it published in now?
Well, first of all, the American edition of Mad, I think, has about the second largest foreign sale of any American magazine. We sell a tremendous amount of copies overseas. And overseas, Don Martin is by far and large the most popular feature, followed by Aragones and Prohias. And of course, the reason is that all three of these artists are mostly pantomime.
Yeah.
And the foreign readers can enjoy it without even having to know English.
Oh,
But then we have a number. We have about 10 or 11 foreign editions, some of which are tremendously successful. Our German edition...
A friend of mine brought me back one from Germany. We were just looking at it the other day, and we noticed on the front cover, it seemed to be a little bit different. Now, aren't these...
No, Germany does their own covers. I mean, they'll take our covers and repaint them.
Really? Why?
Well,
they do whatever they want with the material.
Oh, yeah. Well, within reason.
Because it was very similar, you know, we compared...
They think that their paintings are better than our paintings, and sometimes they are. But they're very successful. I'd say they sell about 250,000 an issue, which for Europe is very, very good.
Yeah, because the price was also very expensive each other.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
They add their own material, because in the book...
They're allowed to add, they're supposed to add no more than 6 pages of their own. Some of them don't add any, and some of them add more, and I got to catch them to know it.
Okay, before we get into questions about you yourself, we want to get a little bit about you. You know, a lot of the readers of our paper won't be familiar with your background. Could you just, like, briefly describe your father's role in comics and how you got to be here?
Well, my father kind of started comics. He was an advertising man, and he started producing what amount to little comic books. At the time, there were no such things, which he would sell to stores or companies to give away as premiums. And then one day he conceived the idea of putting 10-cent stickers on them and putting them on a newsstand and see how they went, and they went very well. So he sold a publisher on putting out the first commercial comic magazine, which was Famous Funnies. And
Would you consider him then the creator of comics, or?
Well, one of them. There were other people
biased,
involved.
Right? I mean, you know, is it...
Yeah, but I mean, he wasn't the only one. There were people that helped him and were with him, but he was the guy that I guess was the prime mover in the beginning. And he was in comics all his life, and he discovered Superman, but he let it get away.
Was he responsible in part for, I don't know if you had heard, I guess it was about a year ago on the news, they were talking about the two creators of Superman, and up to this whole point, they had gotten none of the royalties for it.
Yeah, well, this is not true. If you want the true story on that, I have a NBC follow-up on that somewhere around, which I'll try and dig up. They got the equivalent of millions of dollars in royalties. But this had nothing to do with my father because he didn't own it, unfortunately.
He had them he had the original prints in his hand, right?
He had the stuff that Sequence just circulated, and he knew that some people in another outfit were looking for a lead feature for Action Comics. That's DC, of course, now. And he sent it up. He said, I think this will make a good feature for your new comic. He just didn't happen to need one at that point, but that's too bad. Anyway, he came along with Wonder Woman and a number of other characters of the day, most of which are gone now. I don't know, is Flash still around? Flash, Green Lantern, they were all his. Then he sold out the whole business. Well, he sold out the whole business to the Superman people around 1944.
That's who finally ended up with
Well, that's a different, they still own that, in a sense, but that's a different thing. That was later. This was back in 1944. At that point, I was in the Army, and when I got out, I was studying to be a chemistry teacher. And fortunately, I never had to, because just before I was graduated, my father got killed in an accident, so I came here. And I've been here now 32 years.
EC still exists, right?
Well, EC is it's kind of messed up. There were two kinds of ECs. There was EC Publications, which is the name of the company which owns Mad, and the company in turn now is owned by Warner Communications, which also owns Superman. But then there's the old EC Comics, which go under the banner of EC, Entertaining Comics, and I still have those.
What does that contain? What kind of...
Well, there's horror, crime, science fiction, war.
Still around?
Well, we put them out in hardcover now. And sometimes we make movies from them, and now we're working on TV. So they're still around, but that's a whole separate thing. But that's called EC also, so there's really two ECs now. This EC and that EC.
And you don't publish the EC comics, or you do publish them?
I know, I just have it out on a royalty basis. Some guy out west is publishing it. Beautiful job, I'll show them to you if you want to see them.
You said a movie, you ever plan to make a movie with the Mad Crew?
Yeah, Warner Brothers is now working on one.
Really?
Not with the Mad Crew, no.
Well,
a Mad movie.
Right.
Yeah.
Is it based on the Mad Fling?
No.
What was that?
The Mad musical? That was an off-Broadway musical that ran for a couple of years. It was mildly successful. It still plays around occasionally. Colleges and so forth will get a hold of it and play it. Once in a while, I think it played in New York about 3-4 years ago, just for a week. It's practically over.
What was it based on?
It's just like a musical, skits, different skits. It's based on Mad. Some of the stuff was taken out of Mad, some of it was original. It was written by two Mad writers, Larry Siegel and Stan Hart. And these guys later did the Carol Burnett show, or a lot of it.
Were any of the music from the albums, Goose, I don't know when you had them a while back, Sing Along with Mad and some of them. Were they taken from the show? Or?
No connection.
Do you still, in the book it had said that when you did your horror comics, you get the writers together, you bounce off ideas off of each other until you get something you can involve a plot in. Do you still do that with Mad at any time?
No, I'm too busy with the business end now. So Feldstein does it all himself. He's the editor.
Does he write?
Not anymore. What he rewrites.
What is the business end mostly? What is your...
Collecting monies due, making contracts, paying bills, making payrolls, planning, Yeah.
So getting back to how you got here, and you landed into your job, then you more or less inherited your father's business.
Yeah.
What you up to now?
Well, my father's business at the time was bankrupt because after he sold out, he went back into comics and he put out a lot of educational kind of comics, and they didn't sell, and he lost a lot of money. And so when I came in, I started putting out things that would sell. For a couple of years, I just fumbled around putting out not very good westerns and crime comics and love comics. And we had an imitation Wonder Woman called Moon Girl. And none of these things sold because they were terrible. And then we started putting out the horror comics. And when I was a kid, I used to read horror pulps and science fiction pulps, and I loved that stuff.
Yeah.
So when I got into it, I found I could do a pretty good job in there. And of course, at that point, Feldstein joined us, and he's a damn good editor. And so things took off from there.
Okay. You said in your biography, once again, that there are a number of things that you do well. Traveling, eating, wine tasting, laughing, and in between all these, publishing mad. Which one is at the top of the list and why?
Eating.
Okay. Most definitely, right? Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay. Looking at the current saying of Purdue chicken is, it takes a tough man to make tender chicken broth. What kind of man does it take to make that?
A nut.
I see. Okay. How do you get your writers and material and well, consider this one, right?
Well, the writers get the material. All I had to do was get the writers, and actually, most of them walked in. They just, it started out at the very beginning when Feldstein took over Mad from Harvey Kurtzman, who was the original editor. Al was writing most of Mad himself. But, you know, as the thing was published, writers started walking in. I think our first writer was Frank Jacobs. Don Martin came walking in. Aragones came in from Mexico some years later, and Trujillo came in from Cuba. And Siegel walked in from, I don't know what he was doing, television maybe. And one by one, they just came because they saw the magazine and they thought they'd like to write for it. We never actually went out and, you know, ran an ad saying we're looking for writers.
Yeah. But you must get a large number of people that come and they try to wait, right?
Yeah, we mostly in the mail. You know, they'll send in the most awful scripts, and but once in a while we do get a good one. And you know, you sift through 100 or 150 and you find one good one, then you got another writer. And we don't find them very often, unfortunately. I wish we did. Nick Meglin seems to be mostly in charge of that. He nurtures these people along, and some of them have turned into very good writers.
What authority do you have personally over what's printed?
Well, I have complete authority, but I rarely second-guess Feldstein. Yeah. I don't even see the book till it's ready to get down. And at this point, I have to really be against something to want to change it because it's a hell of a job at that point. And mostly I never find anything that I want to change. I just make a few grammatical corrections and spelling corrections, maybe, that's all.
Have you ever gotten an issue that you really felt that last opinion on?
Oh, yes, once in a while. Once in a while, the staff gets a little rough on religion. Now, I'm not religious myself, but I don't want to offend people who are. So once in a while, we've had to make a change. That hasn't happened in a good many years. I can't remember the last time I asked for a change of any magnitude.
remind me today where you went to St. Patrick's Cathedral, walking around. The tourist attraction is wearing masks and having all these, you know, selfies.
Really?
Yeah.
You walk in and they have like a
Taking the
tourist
pictures of the
booth,
flashes.
information booth, signs and
Everybody's looking for the buck, even the church, huh?
Alright, were you ever dissatisfied with the result product of Mad? And particularly when Harvey Kurtzman and most of your crew more or less deserted you to go to right for Trump.
What was the question?
Alright, are you ever dissatisfied with the final result of Mad? I mean, are they
Oh yeah, sometimes I don't think a story is all that funny, and I'll make mention of it. But you know, in comedy, it's pretty tough to hit all the time. Nobody does it. I mean, even the big TV comedians, you put an hour show on. Carol Burnett, for example, is one of the better ones, and she'd bomb every once in a while. You just can't do it. But by and large, you know, you take it on balance. So by and large, her shows were tremendous, and I think by and large, Mad is good. We have a lot of stuff that isn't. But, you know, if you read every issue, you'll get mostly good stuff. Most of the time, once in a while, it'll be a terrible issue with a lot of bad stuff in it, but then there'll be a couple of good ones to make up for it.
Okay, do you ever wish you could just get away from it all with Mad? And,
No,
do something else?
oh God, I can't imagine what else I'd ever want to do.
You have no alternative?
No, I hope I die here.
Okay. And you're extremely happy with it?
Oh, yeah.
A quote from Alfred E. Newman was once, "A successful man is a clod just like you who worked harder." Do you agree with that statement?
I agree with half of it. The other half is, and who was lucky.
Who writes those little quips in the opening?
Jerry writes some of them, but I think we have a girl named May Sakami who I think sends a lot of that stuff in, but I'm not really sure.
And how about the letters in the front? Are they all?
Well, they're legitimate, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jerry has a file on all those. Just in case somebody doesn't believe it, he can usually pull the letter out.
The way Mad is set up now, in the book it was saying that you had changed, you wanted to do, the format of Mad was different from the comic because it didn't want to follow the rules that were being set up for comics, the censorship rules. And I didn't when I was reading it, I didn't understand what the difference was and why it was so important. So what's the difference between Mad and, say, a comic book or a regular book?
Well, there are three apparent differences, and while they might not seem important to you, legally they were important. The first difference is a different size. The second difference is it has no color inside. You know, comics are colored, and Mad doesn't have color inside.
Those will have no advertisements either, right? Now, why?
Well, yeah, but that wasn't one of the things. The third thing is that all our script is in typography, and comics are hand-lettered. Now, somebody came along, and there is on the books of New York State, believe it or not, although it's never been used to my knowledge, there is a law against horror comics and crime comics, making them illegal. I'm sure if anybody ever tried to use them, they'd find they were unconstitutional, but nevertheless they're there. So, you know, there's a lot of horror stuff around similar to Mad. It's black and white, has typography, different size than comics, and technically those are not horror comics, because in the law, comics are defined as being a certain size with colored drawings and hand-lettered balloons. See? So the reason for changing Mad, in part, was to avoid that. Or any connection with comics, because comics were having a lot of problems then. But actually, I don't remember that I said exactly that, and if I did, it wasn't accurate. The real reason for changing Mad was Harvey Kurtzman had gotten a very lucrative offer from another magazine. And he was always ashamed of the fact that Mad was a comic, because he wanted it to be something better. And so in order to keep him, and not lose him to the other magazine, I gave him the option of turning Mad into a magazine rather than a comic. And so the result was its present format, which is not a comic. Something in between a comic and a magazine, but I don't know what it is.
Do you plan any changes, or has
No.
seen any changes?
No, it's been this way now since '55, and I don't plan any particular changes.
You don't plan to change the content or the format or anything? It's just...
Oh, the content may change. I don't plan to change the format, no.
You consider yourself offbeat?
Well, in many ways, but I don't know what you mean by offbeat.
Okay. Keep them square.
Well, I'm in many ways I'm square. So offbeat, I always think of as what we used to call hep, which I'm not. So I can't say that I'm offbeat, but I'm oddball.
How about radical?
In some ways, and in other ways, no.
To a
I mean-
certain extreme, maybe? Or...
Well, no. I mean, we characterize people today as liberals or conservatives, to the left, to the right, and sometimes these are oversimplifications because I'm very left in some areas and very right in others. So, and I think a lot of people are. So
you don't really like putting titles on people, or?
well, I think it's misleading sometimes. I mean, depending on what we're talking about, two different people could get two entirely different ideas of what I'm like, because if they're talking sex, they'll think I'm an extreme liberal, and if they're talking economics, they'll think I'm an extreme conservative, and they'll be right. So what am I? I'm nothing.
Okay. So then, I guess...
Excuse me.
Right. Okay, let me just finish up here. So then what do you think of today's permissive society, as it's called?
Well, again, you see, on the sexual side, I think it's wonderful, and I'm all for the new sexual freedom and all for everybody having a good time. Within the limits of taking responsibility for their acts. On the other hand, if you mean by permissive society, letting criminals get away with anything on the theory that you don't want to hurt their psyche, and they had a hard upbringing or something, and the complete breakdown of law and order which we seem to be experiencing, then I'm against the permissive society. So again, I have to waffle.
So you say these ideas then are they more or less reflected in man?
No, Mad has absolutely no editorial policy, which is another big difference between Mad and Lampoon, for example. Lampoon is openly and unabashedly to the left in almost everything. Mad has no policy at all. It depends on the writer. And we will have articles in the same issue reflecting contrary points of view, because one writer will be one thing and another writer will be another. And we see nothing wrong with that. In fact, we think it's healthy.
Yeah. You don't mind putting in ideas other than your
As long as it's funny, we run anything. And the typical example of this was back in, I think it was the 1956 presidential campaign, when we had run an article kidding the life out of every presidential possibility for the position. And somebody was reading this thing and laughing hysterically till he got to Stevenson, because that was his man, and he didn't think it was a bit funny what we said about Stevenson, you see. And of course we feel you should slam them all.
I think it's President Carter.
No comment. Oh, boy.
Okay, let's see. All right, if you don't mind taking a stand on a current issue, what do you think of the proposal to bring back the draft?
I think it's an absolute necessity that we have registration. I hope they don't draft anybody till they need to, but they tried. You can't take that away from them. They tried to have a volunteer army, and it just didn't work. And they don't have enough people. They don't have as many as they need, and the ones that they're getting, let's say, are not the cream of the crop. Because to some extent, you might say that people that voluntarily join the army are not necessarily the kind of people you're looking for to have a great army.
Do you think you've hit the peak of your career now, or?
Oh, I'm sure I hit it a long time ago. Now I'm just drifting.
What was your favorite time, your favorite era? Was there any particular time?
Well, I enjoyed the old EC Comics most because I was doing creative work back then, and now I'm just in business, and while I enjoy it, and it's very, very interesting, it's not as much fun as it was 20 years ago.
So what do you think the future times hold for yourself and Mad?
Will Mad go on forever?
Oh, nothing goes on forever, but I still think Mad has had an incredibly long run. My goodness, it's now in its 28th to 29th year. I don't envision that anything will happen to Mad in the near future, and hopefully not even in the far future. The only problem that Mad has is there are less kids than there used to be. There was a tremendous bulge in the birth rate after, I guess, Korea, and those kids have grown up and gone into adulthood, and there just weren't as many kids coming along after that, and so it comes like it goes in waves. Well, as far as Mad's age group is concerned, we're in a falling market, and the teenagers are coming along now, not as lot like they used to. A lot of schools are closing for this reason. They were to build a whole lot of new schools, and now they're empty. And, and they're starting to close schools. Same problem. Teachers are going to be out of jobs. So it's difficult.
So you would like to see, Mad continue like, and even after you were gone, perhaps, would you like to see Mad?
Oh, it would be nice. It would be nice it went on.
You don't think the idea will ever retire, or?
I don't know. There used to be a book called Ballyhoo, but it was a flash in the pan. It came and went probably in 2 or 3 years. I think Mad's been around long enough that if we can keep coming up with a talent, there's no reason. Kids aren't going to change. Kids are always rebellious. For 2,000 years, kids have been rebellious, and Mad kind of caters to their rebelliousness.
Does it incite the rebellion, or does it suppress it?
Well, there are those who say it incited it, but I don't think it does. It certainly doesn't suppress it. I think it just makes everybody more savvy. I hope.
So is Mad something you take great pride in?
Oh, yeah.
Basically for that reason? Or?
Yeah.
Okay. I suppose that's good. Any additional questions? Yeah.
Okay.